Everyone, good evening. We will now call to order the Planning Commission's special meeting of January 26, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the statement of values. Secretary Bhatnagar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Statement of values. As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Everyone, please have a seat. We'll go to the roll call. Elizabeth.
Okay. Commissioner Bhatnagar?
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini?
Yes.
Commissioner Chair
Here.
Kuru?
Here.
Commissioner Hero has notified us he will not be at the meeting. Commissioner Wang?
Here.
Commissioner Buza?
Present.
Commissioner Salim? Here. Thank you.
We will need a motion to excuse Commissioner Hero. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Lance and a second by Commissioner Biagini.
Commissioner Bhatnagar?
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini?
Yes.
Chair Kuru?
Yes.
Commissioner Wang?
Yes.
Commissioner Buza?
Yes.
Commissioner Salim?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. So moving to the next order of items, declaration of commission procedures. Secretary Bhatnagar, if you could please read the procedures.
Sorry, I was on mute. Declaration of Commission procedures. Public hearings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. 1. The chair of the commission directs all activity during the hearings. All comments shall be addressed to the commission. 2. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent hearing. 3. Applicants will be allotted up to 10 minutes to present and justify proposals. Following staff presentation of the item, other speakers will be given up to 2 minutes. The applicant is allotted up to 5 minutes for rebuttal of comments. Number 4, no additional comments will be accepted upon the close of the public hearing, although the commission reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. 5, special procedures or time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. And 6, appeal of commission actions must be filed in writing within 7 calendar days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. We move to the next order. Copies of the current agenda and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available from the Planning Division office. Well, not on Friday afternoon, but at least it was available Friday afternoon preceding the meeting and available online. So we go to continuances and exceptions. Today is a continuance from our scheduled Monday meeting. So if not for that item, are there any other items that need to be continued without hearing, withdrawn, or taken out of order?
No, we don't have any requests.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. We can proceed. Do we have there are no consent calendar items on tonight's meeting agenda. So we will now move to the public presentation. Public presentations is an opportunity for members of the public who would like to briefly address the commission on any item not on today's agenda. Do we have anyone?
No, we do not have any requests.
Thank you. Please note that at times the commission has very limited ability anyway to discuss those items, and today we don't have anybody who's asking for any other topics. Moving to the public hearing items for today's agenda, we have the study session, amendment to the City of Santa Clara General Plan by adopting an updated housing element for the 2023 to 2031 housing element cycle. Staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have our whole team here with us tonight, online for you. But I'm going to turn it over to our consulting planner, John Beatty, who's going to start our presentation for us.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt just to clarify. I think that the chair accidentally said study session, and I wanted to clarify for everyone that this is actually the hearing to recommend the actual housing element. So just to clarify that.
Thank you, Rena. Thank you for that correction. Duly noted. Staff, if you want to.
Yeah. So, John, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
I'm ready. Thanks. Can everyone hear me and see me okay?
Yes, much better than Monday.
Yeah, thank you. That was interesting. Well, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. John Beatty, Consulting Planner in the Planning Division. It is my pleasure to present the adoption draft housing element to you this evening for your consideration. I also want to take a minute to thank my teammates at the city, our consulting team at MIG, and most importantly, the stakeholders, advocates, and community members that participated in this process. And let's see, let me see if I'm able to share here. All right. Trying to share my presentation. Let's see if I can successfully do that. All right. Is everyone able to see the presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is an outline of tonight's presentation. After a bit of background, the majority of our slides will be focused on how the city addressed the required components of the housing element. Then we'll briefly review how we address the state's formal comments on the initial draft housing element, the environmental review process, and outline the next steps. And as Rena mentioned, we'll be asking for your recommendation to City Council. So as you'll probably recall, housing elements are one of the required elements of the general plan. Unlike other components, housing elements are required to be updated every 8 years and are reviewed by HCD and certified if found to be in substantial compliance with housing element law. In a later slide, we'll note some of the consequences of not having an adopted or certified housing element. The city's current 5th cycle housing element was adopted in December 2014 and certified by HCD in February 2015. The planning period for the current housing element ends on January 31st. In the Bay Area, the statutory due date for submittal of adopted 6th cycle housing elements to HCD is January 31st. HCD then has 90 days to review and let us know if there are additional corrections or if our housing element has been certified, hopefully the latter. Little bit of a background. One of the main components of the housing element is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. The RHNA process, which for us and our region began in 2019, began with the state much earlier than that. The state is responsible for identifying a total number of homes by affordability level for all regions in California. And they also did so for the Bay Area region. And the total for All of the town, cities, and counties in the Bay Area is 441,176 units. The Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG, then worked on developing a methodology for allocating those units to all the jurisdictions in the Bay Area. And that RENA plan was approved by HCD in January 2022. As a point of comparison, the fifth cycle RENA for the entire Bay Area was a little under 188,000 units. Like to note that the city of Santa Clara, along with a couple of other jurisdictions in our county, participated in the development of the RENA methodology and plan for the Bay Area between October 2019 and May 2021. There we go. The city of Santa Clara's sixth cycle RENA is a total of 11,632 units distributed among the income levels shown in this table. The income levels are percentages of the area median income. Now, in comparison, the fifth cycle RENA total for the city of Santa Clara was 4,093 units. I'd also like to note that the very low income category actually includes both VLI, very low income, and extremely low income, or ELI, split evenly. And just so you're updated, for our area in fiscal year 2022, the AMI for a family of 4 is $168,500. And when you apply that math to the top end of the moderate income category, or 100 up to 120% AMI, that's a pretty whopping $202,200. As I mentioned, the next bunch of slides are going over the required components of a housing element. And this is kind of an outline of what's coming next. We'll be talking about housing capacity in terms of constraints and sites inventory, the city's housing program as an evaluation of our fifth cycle plan and how that informed the sixth cycle plan, affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is a new requirement, outreach, and general plan consistency. In terms of constraints, state law requires housing elements to analyze potential and actual governmental and non-governmental constraints to the production, maintenance, and improvement of housing for persons of all income levels. Where constraints to housing production related to the city's regulations or land use controls have been identified, appropriate programs to remove or mitigate these constraints are included in our sixth cycle housing plan. A prime example of one of those programs is the city's first comprehensive zoning ordinance update, which should be coming to you in the near future. So again, governmental constraints are things like policies, standards, requirements, even environmental rules, non-governmental constraints, things that are largely out of our control, include things like land costs, availability, construction costs, availability of financing. And in terms of our sites inventory, the strategies for meeting the city's RENA continue to be implementing the city's long-range plans, supporting development on other sites with existing capacity for housing, and supporting and facilitating the creation of ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. Adopting the comprehensive zoning ordinance update supports those first 3 bullets by including new and modernized zoning districts that are consistent with the underlying general plan, thereby reducing the need for things like the plan development rezoning process that we're all too familiar with. The zoning ordinance update will also have new objective development standards, including for multifamily. That should make review and approval of those projects much more straightforward. And then we'll have codified standards for ADUs and additional or updated standards to address other new or recent housing legislation. And of course, we'll continue to monitor and report on our progress toward meeting the city's RENA and other aspects of the housing plan through the annual annual progress report. Continuing on with sites inventory, the Tasman East specific plan, Patrick Henry Drive specific plan, Lawrence Station area plan, and the Gray Star project and the Freedom Circle focus area are the city's adopted long-range plans that have within them a number of pending and approved projects. These, along with several other projects in other areas of the city, represent a substantial pipeline of almost 12,000 units. And beyond the pipeline projects, there is capacity within the adopted specific plan areas for additional units that aren't currently pending or approved. The approved Freedom Circle focus area, which you may remember has additional residential capacity beyond the Gray Star project, an additional almost 2,500 units. That's not included in our sites inventory because a specific plan has not yet been adopted. And for similar reasons, El Camino Real is not included on the sites inventory. ADUs will continue to be a component of the city's meeting the city's RENA. The 340 ADUs anticipated is based on an average of the number of ADUs issued building permits from 2018 through 2021. The table on this slide combines information from the previous two. HCD recommends jurisdictions provide an adequate buffer in their sites inventory of between 15 and 30% more capacity than required to ensure sufficient capacity to produce unmet RENA at all income levels throughout the entire housing element cycle. For Santa Clara, at the start of the upcoming 6th housing element cycle, there are sufficient sites to provide a total buffer of approximately 73%. A surplus of over 8,400 units. Most of this large buffer is occurring at low, moderate, and above moderate incomes, with very low income at about 18%. Santa Clara, again, will continue to track development on sites in the city's inventory with annual progress reports to HCD to ensure that the remaining sites are sufficient to meet the city's unmet RENA. And part of the work of the housing element update is evaluating the effectiveness of achieving the city's 5th cycle housing element RENA and housing plan. Through 2021, building permits were issued for 5,266 units, which exceeded the total 5th cycle RENA of 4,093 units. However, as you can see from the table, most of the units produced were in the above moderate category. One of the bigger changes in the 6th cycle housing element is to take steps to facilitate deeper levels of affordability, particularly ELI, VLI, to try to address some of the potential shortcomings from the 5th cycle. And as we discussed at prior council and planning commission study sessions, the goals and policies of the current 5th cycle housing element mostly carried forward into the 6th cycle housing plan, with goals / policies A through D essentially unchanged, and goals and policies E added specifically to address the new AFFH requirements or affirmatively furthering fair housing. For the 18 implementing actions which support multiple housing goals and policies, the majority are continued from the 5th cycle housing element. The objectives that support each of those actions, however, is where you'll see most of the changes in the housing plan between the 5th and 6th cycle. Primarily, the objectives have been organized a little better into discrete objectives that are to be completed during a specific time frame, and ongoing objectives are those that happen throughout the time frame of the housing element. The objectives were also modified to be more responsive to community, stakeholder, and HCD feedback, to be more specific, measurable, and timely, so that we'll be able to better demonstrate our progress at implementing the city's housing plan in our annual progress reports. These next few slides are a few examples of the first 3 implementing actions and their objectives. This slide shows action 1, provision of a variety of housing types. The 2 first bullets are examples of discrete objectives, and the third is an ongoing objective. The first objective is in response to recent housing laws that either recently went into effect or will soon go into effect that require cities to allow and or change how cities approve certain types of housing. The zoning ordinance update, again, will address these required changes. Action 9, which you'll see a little bit later, goes into more detail about how the zoning ordinance update will include other changes that facilitate or remove barriers to housing production and bring the city into compliance with other recent state laws. The second objective was added in response to feedback from the Planning Commission, City Council, stakeholders, advocates, community members, pretty much everybody that we interacted with through this process, that 80 to 120% AMI housing is no longer affordable enough for many residents in Santa Clara. And this third objective on the screen is a commitment from the city to monitor and report on the production of ADUs. And if the production falls below our anticipated levels, to present a plan to City Council to remove barriers and or further incentivize the creation of ADUs. Let's see, this slide is action 2, and that's about the city's affordable housing ordinance. It includes objectives to assess the feasibility of updating the ordinance to better align with recent studies supporting deeper affordability for inclusionary projects, like we've seen applied recently with at Patrick Henry Drive. We'll also look at updating the definition of moderate income from 120% to 100% of AMI, and also address possible changes that would keep BMP homes affordable for 20 to 30 years instead of the current 5 years. And this slide is action 3, affordable housing incentives and facilitation. It includes several objectives, including the redevelopment of the former Kings Highway Motel on El Camino Real, and establishing ways to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing on other sites. And these next 2 slides are just a list of the remaining actions, the remaining 18 actions. Action 4 through 11 are on this slide, and include things like our zoning ordinance update I mentioned earlier. This slide includes actions 12 through 18, which includes action 13 on residential displacement, which the Planning Commission should have received some correspondence on recently. These next few slides are about affirmatively furthering fair housing. We provided a much more thorough briefing on this new housing element requirement at 2 earlier Planning Commission and City Council study sessions, but I'll go over that a little bit with you because it's such a big component of this housing element process. As you may recall, Assembly Bill AB 686 from 2018 established the requirement that all jurisdictions must ensure their laws, programs, and activities affirmatively further fair housing, and that they not take actions inconsistent with this obligation. And housing elements are included in that. Housing elements must now incorporate an assessment of fair housing, which includes a summary of fair housing issues and trends and patterns within the jurisdiction, and also how that compares to the broader region, in our case, the county. And AB 686 also added to or expanded on previous housing element requirements for things like public outreach, site inventory analysis, contributing factors, and goals, policies, actions, requiring a specific connection to AFFH. And if anything, we'll leave you with about AFFH. It's definitely more about much more than addressing landlord-tenant issues. It's also looking at patterns of development, at where different types of housing are or will be located, and how the location of different types of housing impact access or potentially lack thereof to amenities and specific life opportunities for residents. In addition to needing more housing, it really matters where that housing is built. And with that in mind, the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, or TCAC, and HCD co-developed a set of opportunity maps that for jurisdictions all throughout California identify areas of higher and lower resources to help evaluate access to opportunity. These maps on the screen show areas of highest, high, moderate, and low resources from 2021 on the left side and 2022 on the right. I've circled a couple of areas on the map. The upper circle shows that in the northern part of the city, an area that was once designated as moderate resource area is now a high resource area. The lower circle shows an area in the southern part of the city that was once designated high resource is now highest resource. These categories are based on an assessment of a multitude of different types of place-based characteristics, all linked to critical life outcomes for education, employment, economic development, and access to opportunities like recreation, healthy food, and healthy environment. And because locating housing in high and highest opportunity areas supports the most positive economic, educational, and health outcomes, especially for low-income families, these opportunity maps are used to inform how to target funding for affordable housing. The north part of the city, north of 101, includes the majority of pipeline and available sites identified in the housing element. Tasman East, Patrick Henry Drive, and Gray Star Project, that portion of the Freedom Circle area, are all located in a high resource area. The central part of the city between 101 and the railroad tracks remains largely non-residential, with a couple of big exceptions. Lawrence Station is located in a moderate resource area in the western part of the city, the central part of the city. The south part of the city, south of 101, is a mix of mostly moderate, high, and highest resource areas. There are over 2,500 units identified in the housing element pipeline outside of the specific plan areas described earlier, including projects along El Camino Real, Stevens Creek Boulevard, Winchester Boulevard, and Coleman Avenue. From 2018 through 2021, the majority of ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, have been permitted in the south part of the city, and we expect that pattern to continue. The city has other long-range planning efforts underway that are not included in the housing element sites inventory. El Camino Real, downtown, the station area plan, but if and when those are approved, would certainly contribute additional housing in the southern part of the city where they are located. And there are other sites in the southern part of the city not on the inventory that are currently general plan to allow mixed use residential that will be rezoned through the zoning code update process to facilitate additional housing development. And then we have several state laws, a couple of new ones that go into effect this July 1st. I know you got a briefing on this probably, AB 2011 and SB 6, that will provide additional flexibility to develop housing on non-residentially zoned office or retail sites. And I think this wraps up the AFFH required components based on stakeholder feedback, meetings with tenants of affordable housing projects, and the assessment of fair housing analysis in the AFFH chapter itself. The city identified a number of contributing factors to housing issues in Santa Clara and how the city's housing plan actions and objectives address those issues. Some of the fair housing issues categories are listed on the left of this slide, and I know it's hard to read, but there's an excerpt from the AFFH Meaningful Actions Matrix from the housing element on the right. Contributing factors are factors that create, contribute to, perpetuate, or increase the severity of one or more of those fair housing issues on the left. An example of a fair housing issue contributing factor and housing plan action and objectives that address the issue under the the category of disproportionate housing needs and displacement risk, which is the issue, contributing factors that lower income households can experience displacement when new developments are built that are not affordable to existing residents. And our Housing Plan Action 13, residential displacement, includes an objective to evaluate and provide recommendations to the City Council on new programs and policies that prevent displacement, and as necessary, adopt programs and policies to further help address that displacement risk. On the topic of outreach, as one of the required components, not including the meetings and interviews held in 2019 and 2020 as part of the city's participation in the HUD assessment of fair housing process, which did help to inform our AFFH analysis. In early 2021, we began outreach meetings and activities specific to the housing element update, including a number of study sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council, community meetings and events, stakeholder and advocate workshops and follow-up interviews, tenant meetings at senior, transition age youth, and family affordable housing developments. There was a full-page article in the summer edition of Inside Santa Clara, which was printed and mailed to about 58,000 residents and businesses. And then we had a very successful community survey that was provided in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese that generated 1,651 responses. And we have a very robust, as of a couple of days ago, at least 1,577 subscribers to the city's housing element update Gov Delivery topic, so they can get notifications of different events and things happening related to the update process. We received a number of written comments during and after the public review draft housing element circulated. We did our best to address all of those comments best we can. And in terms of consistent feedback, one of the top pieces of feedback we received, if not the top, maybe the second highest, was that the city should continue to prioritize our homelessness response. Again, and you might hear this like over and over again, that affordable housing, in quotes, is not affordable enough for many, meaning, or for example, the top end, especially moderate at 120% of AMI, is no longer affordable to most people. And the city should prioritize ELI and VLI housing opportunities for seniors, families, and persons with disabilities, including developmental disabilities. People felt that it was very important to continue to build housing near retail, transit, parks, schools, and walkable areas. And the city should establish programs to support displacement prevention. In terms of general plan consistency, the sixth cycle housing element with a planning period of 2023 to 2031 is consistent with the general plan, which has a horizon year of 2035. The housing element sites inventory reflects capacity that was approved under the general plan phase 3 land use designations as amended. The sixth cycle housing plan is an update of the fifth cycle housing plan's goals, policies, actions, and objectives with some tweaks. And future general plan amendments will be evaluated both through the sixth cycle housing element and through the AFFH lens, that new requirement. HCD's findings and their comments were provided to the city back in November. HCD noted in their letter that the initial draft addresses many statutory requirements, but revisions would be necessary in the 6 areas listed on this slide in order to comply with state housing element law. HCD's comments were generally straightforward, and our HCD reviewer was able to provide additional guidance on how we could revise the housing element to substantially comply with state law. To facilitate HCD's subsequent review, the city prepared a matrix listing each HCD comment on the left side of the table and the city's response or revisions in the adoption draft housing element noted on the right side of the table. And for environmental review, for the housing element that was accomplished through preparation of an addendum to the 2010-2035 general plan EIR as addended. The addendum concluded that the housing element results in no substantial change and no new or substantially more significant impacts than were previously analyzed. And for next steps, the city council will consider staff and hopefully planning commission's recommendation to adopt the housing element at their hearing on January 31st, which is also the deadline to submit an adopted housing element to HCD. HCD has 90 days to review our adopted housing element, and they can either certify or identify additional corrections. If they're minor corrections, we'll just make those corrections and send them back to HCD for certification. If the changes are not minor, we'll bring the revised housing element back through the hearing process before resubmitting to HCD. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some potential consequences of late adoption / certification. And those include the city potentially losing permitting authority, facing builders remedy applications through the Housing Accountability Act, potential litigation and attorney's fees, and losing the eligibility for funding, any grants and loans that have certified housing element as a criteria. And that brings us to our recommendation. We would recommend, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to recommend City Council adopt an addendum to the 2010-2035 General Plan EIR and adopt a resolution to recommend City Council amend the general plan by adopting an updated housing element for the 2023-2031 cycle. And that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. We'll look to the planning commissioners if you have any questions of staff.
And Madam Chair, may I just bring up a procedural issue real quick? As you may be aware, we did receive a 25-page letter from a law firm late Sunday night, which raises a lot of issues about the housing element. We have reviewed it in detail, and I have a number of comments I'd like to make about that letter. But perhaps after you finished your questions for Mr. Beatty would be the appropriate time. But to the extent you have legal questions, maybe we could defer those until after I go through the letter and give you some details about it.
Sounds good, thank you. And so we will basically for John, if we have any questions. Okay, Nancy is prepared with a dissertation for us.
Okay, first I want to thank the staff for, I think it was several inches worth of documentation that tells me there was an awful lot of work that went into it over the last couple of years. Of course, mining through all of that was a real joy. So the Sunday letter, I just want to make sure it's the same late-breaking information that I got, because there was a couple of them. Was that the Farella and somebody letter?
That's the one on behalf of the Housing Action Coalition. It's 25 pages.
That's my first question. I believe the date on that is November 30th, 2022.
Oh, I'm sorry. They've actually submitted two letters. They submitted one in
Lord.
response to the public release draft several months ago, and then they submitted a second one late Sunday night. So I'm going to be talking about just the latest one. Okay. The first one, we already addressed those comments.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. So yeah, I may have missed that in the several inches of material, because my question was going to be, wasn't that November letter, hasn't the element been revised since then? And my guess is yes, and that's why you got another letter. So I'm just going to let you talk on that, and I'll go to my next question. And for purposes of transparency, I did have a conversation with Matthew Reed with Silicon Valley at Home, because there's a lot of information here. And I guess the easiest way for me to ask this question, John, is he had some concerns about language in action item 13.2 for my colleagues. That's page 13.2-17 in the 4-inch stack. And my question, John, would be your comments on his suggested changes. It was very brief. And the reason I'm asking that is because we've certainly talked an awful lot about definitions of extreme low income, very low income, changing what those benchmark figures are. And I did some quick math, and I think for those that are listening tonight or may in the future, my quick math says in order to meet the extreme low income of an annual $50,550, a senior or two on Social Security would have to be pulling in about $2,800 per month. I certainly know several that aren't. And for someone who's a wage earner and is the only wage earner, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or a family, looks like they'd have to make I'm rounding it off, $24.30 an hour. So that is, of course, a big concern about affordability. But that said, can you comment on the request? I'm betting Matthew or somebody at Silicon Valley Home will talk more on it, but I'd like your initial reaction to his suggestions.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We did talk internally about the recommended changes in Action 13. I could bring up the action from the housing element
Please do.
draft if you wanted to see that. I don't have Matthew's comment letter.
It's in.
John, I have it available if it helps for me to put it up.
I think that would be very helpful.
That might be better because we could see his recommended changes then.
Correct.
Okay, hopefully this works for people in the chambers too. Can you guys see Matthew's email?
Yep,
Yes.
keep going. You're almost there.
Okay, here we go.
Keep scrolling. Okay, we're getting there.
I don't know how fast you all are at reading.
Oh, well, I think if you
Okay.
just leave the
Yeah.
part where he's,
Here we go.
there you go.
That's
There we
that's good.
Okay, there you go.
So I think Matthew's clarifications are good. And from a staff's perspective, I think that's something that if the Planning Commission were to recommend incorporating those proposed wording changes to make this action more understandable, I think that was what he was trying to get at. Then I think we would be okay. Staff would be okay with that being included as part of Planning Commission's recommendation.
All right, then perhaps once the commissioners are finished with their questions and we go to the public, hint, hint, if Matthew's listening, he can go further into his recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Biagini. Other commissioners? Do I see any other hands? Not, I could ask, okay, I see Commissioner Bhatnagar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. John, just some quick questions about perhaps your slide 10, if you could pull that up, please.
Definitely try. Slide 10 is the table, the site, one of the site's inventory.
Yep.
All right, let's see if this works again. Oops. It is allowing me to share. Oh, here we go. It says it's sharing, but it doesn't look like it's.
You are
Yeah,
shared.
we can.
Oh, is it up on the screen?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes. Yes,
Sorry
thank
about
you.
that. It looks like it just took a while.
Yeah, John, maybe I got the slide wrong. The slide where you have the buffer listed,
There we are.
which is, again, this next one here, so I was wrong. Apologies, that was slide 11 then.
Mhm.
So quick question here. If you note the buffer, the range of buffer that we have, the widest range of buffer that we have is for moderate housing. And good thing I like here is the above moderate housing has the least buffer. Hopefully we'll get there. My thought here is that the history indicates, and one imagines that the goal to meet the very low housing and the low income housing is where the challenge is, right?
Yes.
So I would have expected a buffer that goes the other way. In other words, the VLI could be 73, the LI could be 58, let's say, and the moderate could be 18, and then above moderate be 8% above your 100% requirement. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, that would, in my mind, enable us to meet the very low income requirements with much more confidence, which we have not done in the past 5, RENA plans. So I'll stop there. Please go ahead and answer that as best you can. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bhatnagar, for that question. Yeah, that is definitely one of the things that we struggled with, debated internally a bit. For purposes of distributing affordable units that are expected from future development on sites, the HCD gives us quite a bit of leeway to decide how those units. So if we have 7,810 units that are available total for the sites, our distribution of the sites in terms of affordability is relatively conservative. And part of that is, we want to be fairly realistic. We still want to meet the HCD guideline. It's not a requirement, it's a guideline to have between 15 and 30% buffer, so that throughout the time frame of the housing element update process, as you get towards the end, you'll still have enough capacity to allow for development to happen, particularly at the lower, deeper levels of affordability. So it's really kind of a combination of trying to be realistic with how we see these sites achieving or potentially achieving affordable housing development in the future, and kind of going along with just this distribution of units is the actual housing plan, and kind of refocusing our actions and objectives to try to help the city actually accomplish greater levels of affordability. And I think some of my teammates could jump in and provide some more context for how we arrived at this buffer. It was a bit of a challenge, I would say, to try to balance the realistic ability for the city to accommodate units at different levels, and certainly, we could move units around and redistribute some of the lower income or moderate units to VLI. But then that could result in issues in the future, where if those sites aren't developed with very low income units, we might run into a no net loss situation where we're then scrambling to try to identify more sites to meet the unmet.
Thank you, John. I didn't mean to interrupt, but what I hear you saying, and by all means, it's not an unfair way to go. But when you say we are being realistic, I understand what you mean is that that seems doable, and it's, let's say, the low risk method of meeting the letter of the law and meeting some of our objectives and goals with respect to what the state is trying to make us do. I think I have an appreciation of that. I mean, I'm not trying to negate the fact that some amount of realism is necessary in this world, right? We have to be pragmatic. But in any case, I'll stop here. But I'd like to suggest that if there's any room for movement here, we should try and do more, because the history is telling us what the reality is. Also, we're just not making enough of those low-income housing, and then we have a whole program, HTF, homeless task force, something like that. I mean, just that, for the past 8-year plans, we have not met that, and your results are showing that exactly. So,
absolutely.
Commissioner Batnagar, can you guys hear me? This is Rena. I just wanted to add something that is just like taking many steps back, that all of the units that are in our very low, and even moderate categories, but certainly very low and low categories, require subsidy. These are projects that will need federal funding. They aren't projects that we cannot achieve these numbers, as John had stated. The numbers that have been given to us through the allocation process are very high, and particularly the lower income level units are very difficult to build and will not be able to be supported only through the city's affordable housing ordinance, even though that is a work program item. If you look in our housing element, to bring back that ordinance to require deeper levels of affordability. So really, the balancing act we're doing here is looking at the state guidance, because they do give us guidance on what they think is practical for us to assign, as well as being realistic about the consequences if we do not achieve those units. So we have a lot of units. The numbers, even in the VLI and LI category, are substantially a greater proportion that they've been in the past, which is, I think, from a community values perspective, absolutely what we want. But the numbers that have been proposed and analyzed here, we think are, crossing our fingers, doable with our best of intentions, not just including the ordinance, modifications to our affordable housing ordinance, but really also looking at other ways to support 100% affordable projects in the city. So I just wanted to provide that context for why these numbers are what they are. And I think we would love to see more numbers in the VLI category. It's just also balancing some of those practicalities.
Yeah. So one more comment and then I'll stop, Chair. So Rena, again, the data speaks for itself, right? Let me ask you a question. So even in the 5th plan, we have not met the low-income housing requirements. That's where we've been short, as John's data provides already, right? So then what has been the consequence? What has the state come down and said to us, therefore you will not be able to do this? What has been a managerial, a state level, an administrative program consequence of not doing what the state said and we committed to do in the last program? None. The consequence is there are people on the streets. So I understand, and I'm with you, but I should really. My point is simple. We are trying to play a balancing act. I understand that part, right? But I think we need to be more aggressive where we know the key concern is, and that's my issue here. That we are balancing it in our favor and allowing that favor to work with us as much as we can. And I probably cannot argue with that too much. But I think as a mindset, right? As a mindset, maybe this plan or the next plan, we got to take the bull by the horns. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for my comments. I don't expect a response, but if anybody wants to make one, that's fine. But that's my key focus here, and I've said as much as I wanted to say here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Bhatnagar. Commissioner Boozer, and then I'll come to Commissioner Lane.
Yes, I have a few questions, but one of the questions that really I was looking at is on page 14 regarding the ADUs. The ADUs, if they don't meet the amount of ADUs being built, the city is going to have some incentives for the owners to build ADUs. What you're doing is you're going to property owners and telling them to start building ADUs. Maybe they don't want to do that. And at the same time, back in 2018 and 2019, you said there was a high demand for permits to build ADUs. At that time, if you recall, the interest rates were in the 2 to 3%, so that you can borrow the money to build those units. Right now, I don't see that happening. Probably your demand is going to drop a little bit lower. Also, you mentioned that in the south part of the city, there was the high demand of building the ADUs. Are those are you considering those to probably be for students from the university to live there? So that really doesn't really qualify for a very low income or low income like you had in your page. What was it, page 11? That it shows that 102 very low income and 102 low income for the ADUs. So that kind of just drops it down. At the same time, what I see a problem and an issue that Reina brought up is a lot of the units for very low income are subsidized unit. Now, if the state, with the way that the economy is going to be heading, they're starting to move the layoffs and so on, maybe funding is going to drop, so it's going to put, it's going to put hindrance, it's going to put a stop on most of the developments that we have going. So this is, it looks like this plan, we have to get this plan approved whether you like it or not, because we got January 31st, so it's like having a gun to our heads on this. But in regards to the amount of units that are being built, I would like to see more for the the low income people, because a lot of those low income, they probably cannot qualify for government assistance. A lot of them can't. The very low income probably do, but the low income or the moderate. So let's see what happens. And this is all assuming that everything's going to be rosy like it used to be 4 or 5 years ago, and this whole plan. And so there's a lot of bumps up ahead. So I think the best thing to do is get going on this and send it to the council so they can approve this, and so we don't get stuck with other suits or anything else.
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Can you hear me? Commissioner Saleh?
Thank you. I'm curious about the public outreach. Did you keep statistics about how many actual people were included in the contacts or actually attended any of the public outreaches? And then separately, did you keep any record of unique individuals? Were you able to understand how many people have heard about this? And then secondly, is there any statistics or information about the net increase or decrease of population in Santa Clara? Are we providing housing for a diminishing population, or are we going to still be behind the curve for the number of people that want to live here? Corollary to that, which you can consider this question to be, if we are in an increasing mode and we are increasing our population, has anyone worked with fire, police, and other services to adjust their expectations for services for an increasing population? When we're industrial and we're commercial, it's not as much of an issue, but as we continue to switch to a more residential community, I think these impacts are going to start to become really noticeable. Thank you. Yeah, there really was two questions in there.
Hey, he's waiting for you to be done.
Can I just bring something on my
Thank you.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, one of the things that the outreach that you had about 1,600 response. That's, I mean, it's 80%, more than 80% of our population didn't even know anything about this or didn't even answer or care anything about it. So we're talking with a minute number of people that responded or show interest in this. So most of our population, 80%, or over 80%, if I do my math right, I'm just real quick here, just doing it on top of my head. So that looks like we need to get a better outreach in this and see what the people are actually going to be footing some of the bill and having to live with the extra population increase and diminished services in our city. I agree with my commissioner. The police, fire, and parks and so on, they all is going to take a hit. And schools, so you name it. That's it.
Yeah, actually, we have 134,000 in the city. I know a lot of those are children and non-voting, non-participating residents. But there are people that's going to be impacted. So I'm hoping that our outreach at least got a cross-section, and I'm not sure that we did. Also, the second half of that question was not just how many people we reached, but how many unique people, because I know that there are motivated individuals that attend every outreach for a particular topic as energetic and enthusiastic participants, but that doesn't diversify our outreach. It only concentrates it. So if you have any information as to what you thought the cross-section was, that would be helpful. I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I might have to punt to our consultant team on the questions about the statistics regarding outreach and cross-section of population and whether we're reaching unique individuals. On the question of population, ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, is still forecasting that the city's population will grow by about 25%. Which is staying in at the same pace as the county overall, and that's a population projection out to 2040 of about 160,000, if I remember correctly. As far as our population goes and services, our population is expected population, at least based on our long-range plans and our approved specific plans, for example, that's the bulk of our increase. All of that has been analyzed, shared with all the departments in the city. So they know as those projects come online that the population will increase. So they'll certainly have some time to prepare and ensure that the city is ready for those new residents. As far as the question or comment on the survey response, in my experience, 1,651 unique responses is a really good response rate. Having worked for other jurisdictions, we would have loved to have gotten that percentage of responses. Of course, we would always like to get more, but it was, at least in my experience, and I don't want to speak for my teammates, that's a pretty substantial success for this process that we got that number of responses.
I just wanted to add on to John Beatty to give some context. That is actually more responses than we've gotten on any effort. And we've gotten a lot of responses lately on various different surveys we've put out. So, and I should specify and say land use effort. I don't actually know if every city effort, I don't know the tally on that, but I just wanted to add some context for John that, yeah, this is for Santa Clara's experience, a very good experience in terms of responses. And I think MIG, Edward Sampson, if there's anything you would like to add about kind of the cross-section of those people who participated not just in surveys, but in pop-ups and really any opportunity we had in the past year to get in front of people.
Yeah, thanks, Rena. I'll just mention or echo the sentiment of staff that the outreach for the city of Santa Clara was really robust when we compare it with other jurisdictions that we have been working with. And if you look at or get a chance to go through that 4-inch pile of documents and look at Appendix A, there's a lot more detail about the individual events and the number of events that were attended. And speaking to the cross section, yeah, generally when we do Survey Monkey, we tend to get more sort of a response from homeowners, longtime residents, people who may be a little bit higher on the income level. And that's why the city made an effort to put it out there in different languages, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese, to get additional responses. And even though 1,500 compared to 140,000, rounded up and say half of those are minors or non-voting members of the public, you're almost to the point where you're statistically significant. I think 3.2%. You'd be statistically significant. So I think the sentiments are a good cross section, and John mentioned some of the ongoing sort of comments that we've seen come up over and over. And I think housing elements are always a balance between what the state is requiring as far as what you include in your housing element, and then balancing it with what you feel as a jurisdiction you need to respond to the community and provide for the community. So I think staff's done an excellent job in sort of balancing those two sometimes competing interests between the state and between local rural.
Okay.
Can I follow up one little?
Okay. One at a time. Hold on. Commissioner Salem.
Okay, so my follow-up, I think, is really the difficulty it is to reach the people that are actually the target of the effort we're making, because I believe, in fact, that we're not going to be needing feedback from residents. What we need is feedback from people who want to be residents. And you're not going to reach them within the city limits because they don't live here yet, and they can't live here because they can't afford to. So I not challenging you, but I would love to hear if there are efforts or any way that you've been pursuing speaking to low-income people living outside of the city of Santa Clara who are desperately trying to reduce their commute and trying to find a home within the city of Santa Clara, because I think they will have the greatest influence on what some of our efforts should be focused on. Thank you.
Commissioner Salim, I think Adam Marcus, our housing manager, can talk about some of the outreach we did to get some specific stakeholder feedback really from that really important group of people that are actually in our community. But thanks, Adam.
Yeah, it's a great question, Commissioner. So again, there was a lot of outreach that happened, and one of the ones I wanted to highlight was, or a couple, was staff went out to various affordable housing developments throughout Santa Clara. But we did ask questions about more generally about what are some of the challenges that you and your peers and your friends and family face, either to find the housing that you already found, or just more generally. And so we did try to elicit some of that feedback from people who are literally being served by affordable housing, to try to understand what were their challenges and what are they aware of from their peers. We also did meet with, through a regional consortium, through the Cities Association, we did some outreach efforts in collaboration with other cities. It was called Let's Talk Housing. You may have seen that website at the very beginning of our process. We did have one meeting that was several cities in the area participated in the same meeting, and there were breakout sessions. And then there was also a smaller meeting with an equity group with representatives from different nonprofit organizations in the region in the South Bay. who have a good understanding regionally of what the needs are, and a lot of the same sentiments that I think we heard or see in the SV at Home letter from Matthew Reed were voiced at that meeting in terms of the need for anti-displacement measures. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of those examples.
Adam, this is Rena. I just wanted to add on that in addition to just affordable housing projects and visiting residents there who were kind enough, we provided dinner and were able to speak with some of them. We also went to supportive housing projects as well as to a senior housing project to try to understand the nature of the unique residential issues that might be occurring with those populations as well.
And the senior development as well.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Steph. Commissioner Boozer?
Yes, really quick. Thank you for answering that. One of the things that I mentioned is it's not your outreach, the people that you try to reach are using the matrix of other cities is what I care about our city and our residents and the people that are going to be paying for this. At the same time, we can try to reach out. A lot of our kind of attract our young people that have left the city, that grew up in the city, but cannot afford to come back and live here, and they want to live here. Those are the ones that I want. They have an investment in the city. They probably have parents that still live in the city, and they're the ones that probably grew up in the city and they cannot come back to the city. There's a lot of them. Even somebody that sat in our council, city council, went through a heck of a time trying to get a place to live here at one time because couldn't afford it. And I know a lot of students have come back with careers, but they cannot afford to live in our city. They have to go to other cities. And I think even Rena, I think she wishes she could live very close to her place of work here in our city. So this is what I want to see them try to see if we can reach out to those people to get them to come to our city, back home again.
Thank you, Commissioner Boozer. Commissioner Biagini?
So, Rena, you might be the best person to answer this. I'm not sure right now, but let me just preface it by saying I recognize that we have a delicate balance here. First of all, time is short to pass a housing element, still has to go to City Council, and at the end of the day, we need the folks in Sacramento to approve it. So we have what we have based on a lot of work done by staff versus, dare I say, what we'd really like to see as voiced by some of my colleagues here tonight. Generally speaking, meaning more very low income, and I'm going to add extreme low income. Now, Rena, you had said or expressed the difficulties in building those categories because they need to be subsidized. So my question to you, I hope I'm phrasing this right, where do those subsidy funds come from? And I'm asking that, this may be a little off target, because I'm working with disabled senior right now who applied for Section 8 housing. It's been a year. She's still waiting. So, we put her up because she's an old friend, but there's an awful lot of folks out there, and if Section 8 is part of the subsidies that we're looking at, we got another problem. So, source of subsidized funds.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Biagini. And actually, I hate to punt this to Adam Marcus.
Okay.
As our housing manager, he is always bringing forward projects that are combining different sources of funding, some of which is city funding, but certainly
not enough.
But when we're talking about subsidy, we're actually talking about the subsidy to construct the units, not necessarily Section 8 subsidies. So I don't know if, Adam, you can talk about some of the funding sources that are used to bring an affordable housing project deal together, like 100% affordable.
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. The bottom line is the federal government needs to spend a lot more money to support the scale of affordable housing that would actually solve the problem. But until that happens, what we do have to work with are the following. We do have, tax credits, which is a federal program That's the most common way to subsidize housing that's between ELI, LI, and ELI, VLI, and LI housing. And that's sometimes paired with bonds, and then the rest of it is our loans from private banks. Cities like Santa Clara tend to have sometimes may have a little bit of money to also contribute to help further subsidize the units depending on what the target group is. There are quite a few new state programs that have popped up in the last few years, especially with the budget surplus that now is a deficit, but there was a budget surplus. So there are quite a few housing programs, some of which we are actively looking at. So there's Home Key. So the Bella Vista Inn is looking to utilize Home Key dollars to help construct and operate interim housing. We are also looking at the AHSC grant, which combines housing and active transportation and urban greening. There's, of course, our inclusionary housing program that delivers certain levels of affordability with market rate housing. So there is a variety of funding sources. I think right now, our best bet is to leverage those state funds, honestly, because those are the ones that are available to us and the ones that we're in a good position to help developers secure by supporting projects when we can, when we have funding. When we put funding into a project and when we support projects, that makes those projects score higher when they're competing for funds with other cities in the state. So the more that we can support projects, either financially or through technical assistance, through assisting to get those applications done, we are doing that actively already. And in terms of the last thing I'll say is vouchers. Again, that's something we don't have control over. It's something the federal government controls. And so the only way to increase vouchers really meaningfully is at the federal level. And our county occasionally gets small increases, but as we all know, the waiting list for those vouchers is very long. And that is really in order to house someone in ELI housing, vouchers are a very important piece of that. You can build the building, but to really make it work, you do need vouchers. You do need more vouchers. So we do what we can with what we have. Excuse me. We've created kind of a sort of temporary voucher, which is our tenant-based rental assistance program, or TBRA. We use that to help about 15 families a year. That's of course 1 to 2 years only, and then after that they need to be paying their own rent. But like I said, we do what we can to help with the resources that we have, and we're always looking to leverage our funds with state funds and philanthropic funds if they become available.
And I think that's probably my concern right now, which is, Section 8, federal, we need help from them. Okay, but even for state funds, it's not, certainly the city doesn't have enough for discretion, and certainly there's conversations that could be had with developers. But at the end of the day, do you feel confident that there is enough subsidy funds out there that aren't going to take 5 years to get in order for us to meet our ELI, VLI, and LI, even at the numbers that we would prefer here on the commission? Or is that too complex of a question? Is the money out there that we can get without waiting 5 years?
I'll be an optimist, and I'll say we're going to do everything we can to bring new funding into Santa Clara, from all those sources I mentioned, and make the most of the funding that we do have to leverage it as far as we can. And we're going to keep trying to do as much as we can to get towards those very, very ambitious numbers.
Wow. Okay, that's concerning, but I promise if I win the $1 billion lottery, I'll give you a hand.
We'll take it.
Thank you. So, okay, I have quite a slew of comments. I'll go with color commentary. Thank you again, staff, for extraordinary effort. I've seen the November effort. We've had a study session in November, and the feedback from HCD was incredible. So I'd like to, one, thank HCD for their comments, very thorough, and a very thorough response from staff. So quite a few interesting facts, and then I have some pointed questions. So first off, I want to start by one interesting fact that I'm just reading on the ABAG report, that City of Santa Clara has, according to University of California, Berkeley, 0.0% households in Santa Clara that are susceptible to or experiencing displacement, and 0.0% live in areas at risk or of or undergoing gentrification. So that's very positive. Thank you, City. Thank you to all those who enable that kind of a fact. That said, there are some other discerning factors that I'm sure you all considered. I just want to make sure that we want to consider that our rents today are approximately $3,000, and that means the household income to afford that is about $100K. So that's the expectation of living in Santa Clara, of which 18% of households today, or at least in 2021, spend about 30 to 50% of their income on housing. And 16% are severely cost burdened, meaning they use majority of their income on housing. So that's the target that we are trying to release, or the group or the population that we are trying to support. And I wanted to say that in addition, the fact says there are 5.4% residents who live in areas that are considered high segregation by poverty levels. So the AFFH, the Affirmative Furthering Fair Housing Initiative, is really intended to target at least that 5.4%. I am incredibly proud that, it's 5.4% and we don't have some extraordinary numbers, but that is still a percentage, and it's still a household, and it's still a family. That said, I have some pointed questions. I noticed that the related, and I'm assuming the TE, Tasman East specific plan, is related project? Is it the related project?
No.
So is the related project numbers not reflected in all of these tallies?
Related is part of the pipeline, but it's not, related is not in the Tasmania specific plan. It's
But
a separate area.
I didn't see related numbers in the table of pending or pipeline projects.
Let me take a
And I
look.
thought that was a
They
substantial.
might have been aggregated as other.
Well, that's not the way
John
related
Beatty.
is projected here.
No, but John Beatty, I don't know, in our table, I think
Let me take a look.
we called out the specific plans.
I didn't see related, and I don't see the numbers of other matching related numbers.
Let me put it on the screen.
Yeah.
So here's in the, sorry, let me scroll up here. Little screen lag. All right. No.
Go to your slides. That'll share, at least from where I'm seeing your numbers. It's not matching.
Sorry. Related is. Sorry. Resources.
I see sites inventory, slide 9, TESP, PHDSP, LSAP, Freedom Circle, other, which is 4,000. That's definitely not related numbers.
Correct, but related is built into that other category. So in the table in the housing element, that shows the pipeline projects, the projects that are approved or under construction in some cases. Related is listed as its own line item, but in my slide, I just totaled up all of the other projects into one line. The related is
So I thought related was much more than,
Yeah.
what's the related housing number?
1,680 units.
That's all.
Oh, that's it?
So for phase one, so realistic related development potential for phase one that we think is conservatively could happen in the next 8 years is 1,680 units. There may be additional beyond that, but that was a conservative estimate based on their phasing. And city teammates, you can correct me if I'm misstating that, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, no, John, that is correct. Related is a very large project.
Yeah.
It's over 9 million square feet, as all of you know. It is actually a majority retail, commercial, office, hotel. So those numbers, those are the residential numbers for the related project.
Okay. Okay, then going to your table that has table 13.6-2 pending and approved projects that talks about the Tasman East, thank you for bringing that up. Very low. What's happening there?
Oh, why are there no very
Yes.
low or low in Tasman East?
Yes.
There certainly could be, but Tasman East is a affordable housing ordinance approval. And so they were not required to provide any units at that deeper level of affordability. Their affordability is requires them to provide some units that would translate to our moderate and above moderate categories. It was only later that for the Patrick Henry Drive project, where the split, if you remember, for that approval and for the Gray Star portion of Freedom Circle, they were required to provide a different split of affordability of 5%, 5%, 5%, and then the balance above moderate. So that's why for these approved projects or pending projects, that's why you see Patrick Henry Drive with very low and low income units and the Gray Star project portion of Freedom Circle with some very low and low, because they were required to do that. But Tasman East, Lawrence Station also predates the current affordable housing ordinance and the different requirements that were placed on Patrick Henry and Freedom Circle.
Got it. And is the reference there on related, Tasman Drive related, proposed, is that tied to related?
Same company, different project. This is their project in Tasman East. They have another site in Tasman East, and then they have the project on the former golf course landfill site. The big
Yeah, we should
related
clarify, actually, just because I know it's confusing. Related in Tasman East is actually Related California, which is a brother-sister company of Related out of New York. So the Tasman East projects are Related California. So we can definitely add California to it, just not to confuse folks.
Thank you.
Same company,
Okay.
different wing.
You know, that was 4 relateds right there in your statement.
Yeah. Good clarification.
Okay, and
Related
so my
California.
question is, in the proposed, do we have an opportunity to actually influence with the new housing element adoption, the required affordable and very low income housing?
So, yeah, so these are all approved for the proposed in the upcoming projects that are in the sites inventory for Patrick Henry Drive. Those certainly will be subject to their current affordability split. Any projects in Tasman East are still subject to their the rules that were applicable when Tasman East was approved.
So I'm asking the two specific lines, T2101, Tasman related, and the Lafayette Ensemble, which are proposed, so project status are proposed. Are they covered under their prior DA?
Yes.
Okay, so we cannot enforce affordable housing very low in this project.
That's correct, right, Rena?
When you say this project, could you clarify again which one we're referring to?
These two.
TE, down below, TE
Oh,
2101.
yes. Those standards are coming straight from the specific plan when they were adopted, when it was adopted. And so there is actually a unique chapter not a unique chapter, a new unique section in chapter, oh boy, I'm gonna forget it. I think it's chapter 18, which discusses all of our affordable housing. No,
17.
17, is it 17? That talks specifically about Tasman East. There we
Okay.
go. Yeah, so we won't be able to enforce new requirements in the adopted Tasman East and those pipeline projects.
Okay, missed opportunity. And then in the pipeline, I still noticed that, okay, Lawrence, Freedom Circle. So our future projects, which are you taking into consideration the pipeline projects as Keeley being one of your projects? Not yet?
As which project is that?
The Keeley?
It's called
Kylie.
Kylie, which is in northern Santa Clara. And just to give folks some explanation of, why certain sites are in our housing element and certain sites aren't. We wanted a housing element that the state would look at and say, yes, what you're proposing is feasible because first of all, the land use is there and the environmental clearance is there. So the sites that we have included do not include any future action on the city council. These are actions that have already been adopted plans with the corresponding environmental clearance. That's why we're doing an addendum to the EIR. We don't have to do a circulated document. So there are other projects that are maybe in our pipeline that are moving through, but we haven't identified them in our specific housing element unless they were actually adopted.
Got it. Okay, and then, so clarifying in your further table that shows now related phase one, again, there's 0, low, very low and low income. And just making a note.
Correct.
Okay, that was relatively recent, knowing arena numbers were around the corners. Okay, my other comments are emergency shelters. They mentioned an electronic site inventory. Is that attached in the plan? Is in the document? Did I miss the inventory?
Of
Where are the emergency sites? Shelters, let me put it this way.
Okay.
Emergency shelters, your response to HCD said an electronic sites inventory.
which response was it? Which comment?
I
Do you
can pull it
remember?
up.
Let me see.
Emergency shelters, search emergency shelters. If I can get my words right. And
We
it
have a couple of
says,
different responses.
so it's in HCD comment emergency shelters, so don't look to your right. Again, I'm opening it up, sorry, I have it here. I just have a million other documents. Okay. Did you find it? There. Include.
Let me see. I'm sorry, is it this, this
No.
comment on the left? Or is
No,
it?
this isn't, there's another
different?
one. There's another
different
one, yeah. Parcel inventory. Sorry, I just missed it. And it said that there was a
Not,
extra, no.
not seeing it.
Oh, no, that's not right then. So I see that you have a providers list. Is that what was submitted? Wait, let me search, Control F. Emergency,
16.
emergency shelters.
John, if it's helpful, I'm looking on the 13.4-16.
16.
Look down below on that one, emergency housing providers.
Okay.
Is that it?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Include a discrete objective that will allow a variety of housing, including emergency shelters. The analysis should additionally address the cap on emergency shelters. So just to electronic sites inventory, the city will submit a copy of the electronic sites inventory to HCD as part of the housing element. So is that something that we will be doing?
Oh, that's not related to emergency shelters.
No.
That's our, the short answer is yes.
But-
HCD has a very wide table. This is attached as Appendix B is our sites inventory. This is just the sites. These aren't the pipeline projects, the ones that are pending or approved. These are the sites that are additional sites that are needed to accommodate our arena. And yes, they have an Excel format. It looks very similar to this. We will be including that as part of our submittal to HCD. But it lists every site, APN, address, where it's located. You can see our sites are Lawrence Station area plan, Patrick Henry Drive,
Got it.
Tasman East, GP, zoning designations, et cetera, what the assumptions were based on minimum or maximum density, the acreage, and what the generated realistic capacity is at the various income levels, very low, low, moderate, and then some background notes on what's there existing,
Got it.
why we couldn't use certain assumptions because the sites are too small. But this is all based on HCD's required
Nice.
Excel framework.
So the question, though, for me is, with the recent floods and with what most surrounding cities, and of course, those by, I am curious how we are looking at housing that is flood-prone now, in light, of course, it's probably a 100-year flood or whatever was it. But are we looking at areas that are by the creeks? We have a couple of creeks in the city, I wouldn't say more than that, but how are we addressing the housing density in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, part of our standard review process is looking at different kinds of constraints or environmental conditions related to development of a particular property. And that includes looking at whether a site is located in a designated floodplain or not. The housing element itself may talk about flood risk as a constraint in general terms, but that's really looked at more closely through the long-range planning processes, through the environmental review for those. So like Patrick, I don't know if Patrick Henry Drive or Tasman East or Lawrence Station have any particular flood risks that they had to address, but if there were any, as part of a condition of their future approval, they would have to design their projects in a certain way to mitigate any flood risks. And that's true of projects outside of those specific plan areas.
And yeah, and that was precisely why I was relating it to the emergency shelters, because a large part of cities that were affected did not expect, were running short on emergency shelter housing, that a lot of people struggled with finding appropriate accommodations once hit by the floods. So, a lack of inventory for the city on potential sites that could be identified for emergency shelters is something that I would encourage, and is actually, I would say, a needed effort within the city.
And the state, and I think the state would agree with you, because they've changed the requirements for emergency shelters, where currently and in the past, the city only allowed emergency shelters in the light industrial zoning district. That with recent legislation that is now law, through our zoning ordinance update process, will acknowledge the change in the law that requires emergency shelters be allowed by right in other areas, other zoning districts, R3, R4, which are multifamily residential districts, as well as the CC, CR commercial districts, and our mixed use districts, as well as our continue to be allowed in light industrial. So the state, I would suggest, agrees with you.
Yeah, and so is there an effort to actually identify specific sites, or are we just letting developers come with a request to build emergency shelter for the city?
I don't know if we've gotten to that point where we're actively kind of looking at specific sites. I think our first step is to comply with state law that requires us to open up the possibility, whether it's developers or a county or some other organization that wants to open up an emergency shelter somewhere. They will be able to do so in many more places throughout the city moving forward. Looks like Adam has his hand raised. Can jump in.
Yeah, Adam.
Yeah, I was just going to add that on a related note, the city council did ask staff to look for sites for possible home key sites, which is a state program that funds a variety of housing types, including interim housing. And in our study session, our homelessness study session with the city council earlier this month, we did mention that there is a site that's county owned that is on Lawrence Expressway at Benton. And the city council, the county is interested in possibly working with the city to develop that site in a certain way. And that community discussion is likely to occur later this month or early in February.
It's very hopeful and insightful. Thank you. I see Andrew Crabtree has his hand up. Andrew?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment a little bit on that too, that generally the city, our housing division, which Adam Marcus is leading, is prepared and receptive to work with developers to do 100% affordable housing projects of various type, including shelters. And that's sort of well understood in the industry that, when there is a need for a nonprofit or a developer that will actually produce these types of affordable housing projects or shelters or whatever they may be, and they approach the city as part of their business model, standard practices, to kind of engage with the city and understand how the city can be a partner to that. And so we are always prepared to do that. We have some resources. If you went back in time when there was redevelopment agencies, there was a kind of a steady flow of revenue that came through that cities used. We have adopted our own inclusionary housing ordinance, but we also adopted a commercial linkage fee, and that's fairly significant. I think we were one of the first cities in the county, maybe the first to adopt it. one, and most have still not. So, we assess fees off of our commercial development. We do get some in lieu or fees through the inclusionary requirement as well for like fractional units or small projects. So we have a source of revenue through that we use to help participate in funding these projects. I don't think the Planning Commission sees that as much, because when we do these affordable housing agreements, they go straight to City Council. It's kind of a different process, but just be aware that that is something the city actively does. And then I just kind of want to take a step aside and talk a little bit about to our goals tonight here. Really, we appreciate and are very willing to engage with the Planning Commission on whatever discussion you'd like to have about policies and things that, goals that you'd like the city to have. But I also want to just kind of emphasize a little bit that our main goal with the housing element is to satisfy state requirements. It's something the state requires us to do. They have lots of rules and say expectations for what's in the housing element. And so we're trying to prepare a document that meets those. At the same time, we're happy to hear thoughts and concerns from the commission about what's going on in the real world. And we think about those things too. And we care about those things too. But we just want to emphasize that sometimes there's, you kind of have to think inside the box of, what is the state requiring, and are we meeting the requirements with the housing element? So that's our goal with that document. You may hear a little bit about that as we go through this conversation of why are things presented as they are. A lot of it is a kind of a conservative analysis, if you will, because we want that buffer of what the city's existing policies and land use designations can support, really, in terms of affordable housing development and housing development in general. And that's what the state's charged us to do. So that's what this document is presenting. But at the same time, we do appreciate the input of the Planning Commission around other policy ideas and concerns that you have.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for reminding. And generally, while the checkboxes that we meet the state requirements, the state's prerogative or goal is to make sure that the local community is thinking about the bigger need of the community. And it's only because we are not doing it that HCD has mandated this through a box to say, thou shall. If we had already preemptively thought it through, it would be a little different in the conversation. So while I agree it's a checkbox, the purpose of the document is really for every local jurisdiction to have an introspective discussion about what its real needs are. So I completely appreciate the clarification on the document, and I actually see a very, very robust document, so very thankful for that. But I just wanted to also share that the role of both the Planning Commission as well as the city is to really take an introspective view as to how it is looking out for its community on all sides. And interestingly, our community is one of the most diverse. We are, in fact, one of the cities, I would say, that has more color, that has its own unique, distinct needs and diversity needs. So thank you again for that clarification. On that same note, the ELI, while the element qualifies this is on page 8CDs, extremely low income households, while the element quantifies existing and projected ELI, it must also analyze their housing needs. The analysis of ELI housing needs should consider tenure, overpayment, resources, and the effectiveness of strategies and the magnitude of housing cost, housing need. And the response from ART is expand the analysis in the ELI household sections, but I didn't quite grasp if that addressed whatever the HCD was requiring us to do. Is that something that John or staff would like to help us understand? What was the actual analysis that revealed from our effort? John?
John's there you go.
Unmute myself. Trying to navigate to that section. And as I am, I invite any of my teammates, the city or MIG, to jump in. Let me see. So I think we did add this section.
Monroe.
Yeah, to try to address HCD's comments, we did also make note that the city did have stakeholder and other outreach, specifically to try to better understand and then convey some of what we heard from various stakeholder groups or people with actual lived experience into our analysis. It's as far as the exact comment, tenure overpayment. Let's see. So we did, I think we included this table where we looked at some of the existing properties with ELI housing units in the city. Edward, or MIG team, do you know if there were other sections where we added some additional details to respond to this specific comment from HCD?
Yeah, I think throughout the document, especially in the AFF 8 section, affirmatively furthering fair housing, when we look at the trends versus local and regional, and try to look at, especially overpayment, overcrowding, and just sort of try to explain, like, I think what they were getting at, like when we look at our matrix at the end of the AFFH section chapter, that if we saw a trend that was increasing, especially dramatically or even moderately, that the city responded with a action in their housing plan. So I think it was more just acknowledging the way we interpreted in the affirmative of what was happening with ELI, and more describing like this is what's happening on the ground in the city of Santa Clara and sort of what the landscape looks like, so that when the HCD Housing and Community Development looks at the actions in the housing plan and what the jurisdiction is going to do to address these various trends within the community, if they find that to be sufficient, given what's happening with those specific demographics. So if I recall correctly, that, you know, although you do have, like many places in California, especially in the Bay Area, burdened households and some slight overcrowding, I think more, if you look at the matrix, those were sort of more of the top things that kind of rose. So what HCD, and taking a step back, is someone had mentioned earlier about you know, the past fifth cycle element, there weren't a lot of sticks for non-compliance. So coming in the sixth cycle, the city, the state has beefed up its sort of compliance section and looking at the APRs. And what's going to be issued for the sixth cycle is, once your housing element gets certified, the city is going to be provided with sort of a checklist of things that HCD is going to be keeping an eye on.
Could you go back to that page, John, that you held? Okay.
Yep.
And what caught me right off the bat, thank you for holding it, the 233 existing ELI income restricted units is far lower than the 5,462 ELI households in Santa Clara. So is the plan, the recommendation below Action 2 and Action 6, intended to meet or supposed to achieve somewhere close to 5,400? I don't even know how we do it with the rate that we have, but is that what are we recommending as the strategy to close that gap?
Yeah, and I think Adam has his hand up, and he's probably going to answer probably yes to that. The actions and the objectives that support those actions are things that the city can do to try to influence the creation of ELI units. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that ELI units are not, it's a very large amount of subsidy, and in most cities, it's really hard to use your affordable housing ordinance or your inclusionary ordinance to get to those levels of affordability. So that's why when you look at other cities, mostly they're targeting at the very lowest, maybe very low, but they tend to be somewhere around low. So you need different strategies to build extremely low income housing. And so that's where you need to bring in other grants from the state level. You need, in some cases, vouchers that the county can issue. So a couple of examples that, we're looking at Civic Center Drive, that is going to have some number of ELI units in it. It's going to have subsidies from a variety of sources. So it's project by project. And to Andrew's point, as developers come in, it's developers' job to go out and find the land, get site control, and then start putting together their capital stack and figuring out how they're going to make the project pencil out. But we can't build ELI units. It's very unlikely we can find a feasible way to do that through the inclusionary ordinance. That's just not the right tool to build ELI. There's other tools in the toolkit.
Thank you, Adam. And that is actually the most revealing part of this housing element, for me at least, that while we continue to definitely meet moderate, above moderate, of course, but the homelessness population is right there. That's where we seem to be taking at this time a very passive approach versus other cities that have gone all in to go to do, whatever they can in housing, both for homeless shelters and transitional, because that, I think, is the ELI numbers. Otherwise, you're not going to be able, and again, how much of a, but my only thought and concern is that we have not made a very concerted or dedicated effort to identify properties that the city can repurpose for. We are thinking revenue generating for most of our properties. We are not thinking of meeting the ELI demand or need from our community, which will continue to grow because this just continues to grow. It'll never go down, but we are not even able to catch up. So just a thought that the city consider a more proactive approach rather than a passive, let the developer come to us with proposals, and then we will make sure that we allow them to go through. Of course, at this time, with all the housing laws, they can build whatever they want. So they don't even need us if they come to us. But what we have to do is something that I'm still uncertain about. So again, I think I've said my points. Thank you again for engaging with us. We have to meet our deadline. And today at the mayor's convention, a very pointed question to the city mayors, where have you finished your housing element? And our mayor gracefully confirmed that we will be going to city council on Tuesday. And while the other cities have submitted and received their second round of comments too, so just FYI, please await your second round of comments. 8 cities really, I can see taking a very, very close look with, of course, our governor's high priority in making housing the highest priority. Thank you again. All right, I see a couple of hands open. I'm so sorry I stole all your thunder.
I was being patient.
Okay, I didn't see your hand here. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I would suggest that we give our attorney his opportunity to review the letter,
Yes.
and then also perhaps a 5-minute break for
Yes, we can. I just see, if you don't mind, I see only one hand up from the member of the public. I know they've attended twice, and that's probably SV at home, Matthew Reed, but I just wanted to make sure we acknowledge him.
Hey, yeah, if you start the public hearing, you'll need to continue with it, and I might recommend we do the legal part before the public hearing.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm
We'll take a
sorry.
5-minute break and we'll come, 5-minute break, okay? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for those waiting online. Give us 5 minutes. We'll be back. who gave us 5 minutes. We are ready to start again. And now we are moving to Xander to finish giving us an update on the response to the public comment letter received late Sunday from the law firm. Xander,
Thank you,
all
Chair. Yeah, I did want to spend a few minutes going over this letter with you. We received a letter late Sunday night from the law firm Perella, Braun, and Martell on behalf of the Housing Action Coalition. In broad terms, they allege that our draft housing element is defective, and they ask the commission and ultimately the city council to reject it, send it back to staff for further revisions, and maybe come back in a few weeks or months with a revised element. It does raise a lot of legal issues. As Commissioner Biagini pointed out earlier, we did have a letter from them in November, and I believe we amply responded to the comments they raised in November, but now here we are at the 11th hour with new comments. So I need to walk you through the issues they raised for about 10 minutes. I'll try not to get too much into the minutia. You've all been very patient and understanding so far. I'll try not to put you to sleep. But just very briefly, I want to go through the 5 issues they raised. The letter raises 5 points. They number them A, B, C, D, and E. Let's see. Oh, good. My screen is shared. First, they say some of the sites that we identify in the draft housing element are not likely to redevelop within the 8-year cycle. They say the quality of those sites is not very good. B, they disagree with the way the city calculated the potential density for the development sites we identified. They thought we overestimated how many units we could build. C, they said we overestimated the land available for housing because we included parkland and roadways, other dedications. D, they noticed that we reused some sites in our site inventory that we had also listed in the last housing element, the 2015 to 2023, and they had some concerns about that. And then finally, E, they want us to add even more housing units to our targets because there are some units that weren't built in the last housing element. And so they want us to add another 500 or 600 units to our RENA targets beyond the 11,500 we were assigned by ABAG. So I want to work backwards. Argument E on page 20 of their letter. The city must address the unaccommodated need from the 2015 RENA allocation. And that's all based on this statute that they cite, 65584.09A. Spoiler alert, they're just misinterpreting the law. Here is the law. If a city in the prior planning period failed to identify or make available adequate sites, then the city shall, within the first year of the planning period, zone or rezone adequate sites to accommodate the unaccommodated portion. I love it when first-year legislators write laws. Accommodate the unaccommodated portion. But regardless, the relevant language here is failed to identify or make available. Notice what it doesn't say, build. This law does not change the city into a housing developer. Our obligation was to identify sites. We did that. HCD then certified the housing element because we had identified sufficient sites. We aren't actually required to build the sites. We did identify sufficient sites in our 2015 to 23 housing element. So that's simply a false argument. Next, on page 19 of their letter, argument D, they say that the extensive reuse of sites requires a new use by right zoning overlay. We did list some sites in our sites inventory that we'd also listed in the last housing element. And if you list sites in multiple elements, there is a trigger where you have to allow those sites to be developed by right. They're concerned that we're still doing some sort of discretionary approvals. And so first of all, yes, there are some sites that were listed in both the last element and the new element. Large percentage of the sites in the last element concerned El Camino Real. We didn't relist those. But some included sites in the Lawrence Station area. Those were in both elements. One wrinkle here is that in the last element, the Lawrence Station sites were all zoned industrial, and then the city took action to rezone them to the new zoning designation for the specific plan, which permits residential uses. So they're right that there are special rules that apply when you list sites in 2 cycles, but importantly, those rules don't apply when you've rezoned the sites in between the 2 cycles. The rules they're citing about having to allow those residential uses by right, they simply don't apply because of that rezoning that took place. Beyond all that, even if we hadn't rezoned those sites, they're telling us that we have to allow development by right without a conditional use permit. That is really strange. I've never seen that before. Okay. It's okay. I don't need to share right now. Like I was saying, they said we need to allow housing by right. We do that in the Lawrence Station Area Plan. There's no discretionary approval. There's no conditional use permit. And under state law, as of a few years ago, we can't do discretionary architectural review. It has to be objective. So we already allow them by right. So that entire argument is specious. Let's see. Now let's go back to page 16 of their argument. They're saying that, let me see if I can share again. They're saying that land that is zoned as parks and roads is not available for housing and should be removed from the site inventory. So the attorney here is concerned that we've overestimated the amount of developable land because some of it will be used for parks and roadways. So there's really not as much land as we think. Less land, less room for housing. We should reduce our development capacity accordingly. And they actually provide a chart on page 17 of their letter where they show how we should slash the residential acreage on the Patrick Henry Drive parcels. So you see they've listed each parcel here and said how big we should really count it. Like this first one here, take it from 4.7 acres, go down to 2.38 acres. Gosh. Let me stop sharing. But that ignores the fact that a specific plan is not drafted in a vacuum. Each of the specific plans we adopted went through 2 or more years of drafting based on constant input from property owners and developers. It's not like we were planning on building a certain number of units and then at the 11th hour, we sprung on the developers, surprise, you're gonna have to put in parks and roads. Quite the contrary, we've had the Parkland Dedication Ordinance on the books since 2013, and the developers were involved from the beginning in the design and placement of the parks in these specific plan areas. And that's why if you look at the texts of these specific plans, like page 66 of the Patrick Henry Drive specific plan, you'll see that the acreages are all referred to as gross residential area, inclusive of parks and other dedications. The number of units that are anticipated are the development potential that was worked out with the developers, assuming that a portion of their property was going to be removed for parkland. This was, the fact that a portion was going to be taken for parks was known from the beginning. The number of units planned is based on them having to dedicate that parkland. It's simply inaccurate to say that if we put in parks, we're not going to be able to build as many units as anticipated. That takes us to item B, which is on page 9 of their letter. I'm sorry, page 8 of their letter. I will share again. And this deals with how we calculated density. So there's 3 parts to this, right? So they're saying the density calculations overstate the extent to which the sites can accommodate the RHNA need. And there's 3 subparts. First, they're saying we should apply minimum densities. Okay. They're saying we're required to use the minimum density on each site, and that's based on another statutory site. You see it here, 65583.2C. So once again, I'll just show you what the law says. 65583.2C. What it says is a city or county shall determine whether each site can accommodate development. The inventory shall specify for each site the number of units that can realistically be accommodated on that site. Remember that, realistically. There's a subdivision, subdivision 1, I apologize for scrolling. I hope you don't get seasick. Subdivision 1. If a local law or regulations require the development of a site at a minimum density, the department, which is HCD shall accept the planning agency's calculation of the total housing unit capacity on that site based on the established minimum density. So we could have gone in with our element and said, okay, we're going to calculate everything based on the minimum density, and HCD would have to accept it. The second sentence is not applicable to us. Then the second paragraph is the number of units calculated pursuant to paragraph 1, that one I just read, saying you start with the minimum density, shall be adjusted as necessary. And why do you adjust it? You adjust it to calculate the realistic development capacity for that site. And the way you figure out whether it's a realistic capacity, you look at typical densities existing or approved residential developments at a similar affordability level in that jurisdiction. So you start with the minimum density, but then you get a realistic number by looking what else has been built at that affordability level in the jurisdiction. So it's simply an error to say we should use the minimum density calculator. And none of these specific plan areas are developing at the minimum density. They're all coming in significantly above the minimum density. It's kind of ridiculous to assert that we should use the minimum density. But they're saying even if we don't use the minimum density, even if it's okay to use a higher density, what we're calculating is wrong. So they've taken each of our specific plan areas. The first one here is the Lawrence Station area. And you'll see we've got a list of all of the relevant projects for the Lawrence Station area plan. And they're saying, well, and what we did was we took all the projects that were either already approved or under development. We calculated how much above the minimum density did each site develop at. And from that, we took an average. All of them developed at what we calculated was about 191% above a minimum. And we used that to project for additional sites, what's the expected density going to be. And so they said, well, we cherry-picked which sites we used. And based on that, they're saying it's not 191%, it should be only 160%. And so they added to our chart these bold-faced italic things. And you see they cited one here that's, well, it's only 44% of the minimum and only 94% of the minimum. And based on that, they say we should use an average of 160%. Okay, first of all, how do you get 44% of the minimum? That would actually be illegal. You can't go below the minimum. And the reason is they're simply wrong about the minimum density. They've cited here two very low density sites. This one is 20 to 36 dwelling units per acre. So at 22.49, they're actually above the minimum, above 100%. So they've just simply got bad data. Kiefer is also a different density. These are not comparable developments. These are developments that are at a lower density category. They could add Ramble if they want, but that, at 217%, that's just going to up our average. There are similar problems with their arguments about the Tasman East specific plan. Here again, what they've done is they've taken our chart. Our chart is represented by the mostly non-italicized information. We took all that to come up with an average of about 215% above minimum density. Then they added these additional ones that they say we should have included. It wasn't that we were cherry picking which sites. We simply looked at which projects were approved, already under construction, or far along in the pipeline. It was just a timing thing. It wasn't that we said, let's exclude certain sites. But you'll see here, they say, well, you should have included 2354 Calle del Mundo. Okay, but if you go to the actual housing element and look at the Tasman East specific plan, that is the wrong screen, you'll see that, oh yes, here it is. Tasman East specific plan. Remember, the address we just looked at was 2354 Calle del Mundo. So here's a list of all of our sites, except if you scroll down a little, you'll notice the chart extends onto the next page. What's at the top of the next page? Oh, 2354 Calle del Mundo. So they're simply mistaken. It is in the chart already. They're sure we missed it. In fact, they're so sure we missed it, they listed it twice in their chart as things we should have added. So they've just got some bad data. Even if their data was right, it's a difference between 206 and 215%, which is trivial. I'm probably taking too long at this point. All right. Subpart 3 is about typical densities for highly affordable developments. So some percentage of our residential developments in the next 8 years will come from 100% affordable projects. And they're saying simply we aren't using realistic densities for that. We had a project at 2904 Corbin that had a density of something like 133 dwelling units per acre. But they're saying that since most affordable housing is not more than 150 units, it's usually 50 to 150 dwelling units. So if you have a larger site, you might not get the same density. So they're saying we shouldn't use that average density, we should use something lower. Okay, but when it comes to larger parcels, there are a lot of different avenues one can take. Sometimes we'll have an affordable developer who will come in with an all-affordable building next to a market rate structure. We had a project like that from CORE for the Agri-Hood development, where we had 3 separate components, one senior affordable, one market rate, and that had a pretty high density. They also don't believe that a 100% affordable project, I know I'm not sharing right now. I'm not sure why I'm not featured, but I'm not too offended by that. They also don't believe that a 100% affordable project could be located in the Patrick Henry Drive area because they point out that affordable housing developers like to situate within a half mile of a grocery store. And in their words, Patrick Henry is currently a food desert. The response to that is, first of all, we do allow for grocery stores in the Patrick Henry Drive area. Secondly, Patrick Henry Drive is just south of the Kiley project, which is actively planning to include a grocery store. And thirdly, they're really truncating a much more complicated analysis when it comes to situating affordable housing projects. There are a series of scoring criteria used to qualify for tax credits that are necessary to fund affordable housing. And sure, proximity to grocery stores is one of them, but there are many others like proximity to schools, proximity to parks, et cetera, et cetera. Also, there was no grocery store near the St. Anton project, and that's 100% affordable, and it went forward. All of which is to say their analysis is simplified and flawed. Finally, I need to address their last point, which is point A of their letter. Let me get back to sharing my screen. And here we go, point A. It criticizes our site inventory. The city includes sites that are not suitable and available and do not have a realistic and demonstrated potential for redevelopment. So one of the most important parts of the housing element is set forth in what's chapter 13.6 of our draft element. It's the inventory. It's a list of every site we believe has the potential for residential development during the next 8-year cycle. And they're taking issue with 4 sites in particular because they're saying there's not enough evidence that those sites are going to redevelop with residential uses. For 3 of them, they simply say we don't have enough data to go on. For one of them, they actually cite to the fact that there are commercial leases still in place. So they think there's just not enough certainty of redevelopment. They want us to remove those sites and come up with different sites. Well, you don't have to have certainty. You have to have a realistic possibility. Remember the word realistic. What we have in Santa Clara is a several years history now of converting industrial sites to high-density residential uses. We have done that repeatedly in the city's specific plan areas, and it has resulted in the creation of thousands of dwelling units. And earlier you heard John Beatty talk about the opportunity maps created by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee and HCD. And under those most recent maps, several of these sites are now in high resource areas. So the people that give the tax credits to make affordable housing have made the determination based on place-based characteristics. They have already made the determination that these are good locations for affordable housing, and that makes these sites competitive to get tax credit financing. Beyond the fact that these are high opportunity areas, keep in mind that while we anticipate meeting our RENA target, we've actually gone significantly beyond our goals with those buffers. I acknowledge it's not the best for very low. It's only 23% above what our target is, but no, I'm sorry, that's an old number. It's 18%, thank you. But we do have a buffer in all of the categories. So even if they're right and some of these sites end up developing as commercial, there is a buffer. And worst case, we end up in a situation several years into the cycle and discover that we're simply not hitting the targets and we're running out of sites, and well, that's where the no net loss rules kick in. If we're ever in a position where our buffer has run out and a site in the inventory comes forward with a development proposal to build commercial uses, then we would at that time have an obligation to identify additional sites to make up for the lost units. So there's a buffer, there's a mechanism for dealing with the shortfall. The attorneys would like us to anticipate the shortfall now, not adopt the housing element, violate state law, and come up with different sites. I would suggest to you that our history of building affordable housing in recent years is sufficient evidence. The fact that they point out that there are commercial leases on this one site does not give me pause because, I mean, they say a 6-year lease, okay, but it will, and a 10-year lease, but both of them will end within the cycle, one in 2024, one in 2028. I particularly like the Perlman-Hemme discussion where they say the city has done nothing to analyze or investigate. But then in the next paragraph, they say there is every indication that this will develop as commercial. So they go from there's no evidence to there's complete evidence. So anyway, I've probably talked too long already. I just wanted to give you my impression that this letter does not represent, it doesn't mean that you can't adopt the element tonight if that's your inclination. Whatever your inclination, my recommendation is you don't postpone action on the housing element based on this letter. And if you have specific questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Xander. Commissioner Biagini, no questions. Any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Salem?
Yeah, I'm just curious, can you bill back to them their time and maybe see if their intern that prepared the data could use some mentoring, or I'm just curious.
No comment is fine. I have no idea how to respond to that.
Coming from the Planning Commission. But I would want to acknowledge, as a democratic process, and we've always encouraged, members of the community, whoever it is, to give us their feedback. It is for every individual, every entity with questions, concerns, and I'm super glad and super impressed. Thank you for that Tonight Show, Xander Ab. We just didn't run the music at the end, but thank you for taking the time to analyze every statement to legally defend our city's adoption. And I think that is what is important for all of us to note, that when we receive public comments, we take them seriously. We do take and analyze them, whether it comes from a legal firm or it comes from an individual. It is our responsibility. And so we don't take that lightly. So thank you again for a very thorough analysis. There was definitely effort by the firm to evaluate the data. Pretty revealing, albeit with some perceptions of how it is to be analyzed. But that said, I do want to thank both the member of the community as well as our staff for giving us insight about that concerns and comments. With that, I just wanted to
also say thank you so much, Alexander, and I wish we could build them. That'd be fantastic. But one of the things that you were mentioning in that report says, doing the affordable housing and all this. Well, Santa Clara has been building affordable housing before any of this came around. When we started building houses, if Nancy can probably agree with me on this. We built like a set of homes. We're small, affordable for families, working families, like just, for the baby boomer area and Kaiser homes and so on. We were never a city that went, elaborate. We're not territorial. We're not Los Altos. We're better, but actually in housing ways, we never overdid it until we started doing like, Santa Mouse Woods and Lower Park East and so on, or Forest Park. But any other parts in our city were small, affordable communities for the working class person, for the, the mom and dad, the dad went to work and the mom stayed home. They were very affordable homes, and we always were, were appreciative of the working class and the low income people. So that's why we built the houses the way we did. So those people they're a little bit out of touch. We're not that type of a community. Now we're going to exceed probably what is going to be required for us. But thank you so much again, Alexander. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with you, except that house, because I live in one of those that was built affordable. It isn't affordable now.
So
But at the time, with the
Yeah,
wages
yeah,
they were affordable. If you go by the
they were.
wages the way they are.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I would like to open for public comment. I do recognize that people have dropped off, and I see 2 hands up. SV at home, if you are recognized. If you want.
Sure. I'm going to call it.
Yes, good evening. Matthew Reed, Director of Policy at SV at Home. I want to start by thanking the Commission. I have way too much to say, so I'm going to be very quick. Thank the Commission, really valuable discussion. It's a little heartbreaking when we step back and look at the scale of the need, but it's important. I want to thank John and staff for significant work. To Commissioner Salim's point, there has been really an important effort to reach residents who are not generally part of the discussion. There are a lot of us in this city who are really vulnerable and are often invisible, and I think staff has made an effort. Really appreciate the comments of the chair. She's right. This is an opportunity to be introspective. This is not like prior housing elements. It happens every 8 years, but this time there are significant new laws that make it an entirely different process, more analysis, and a higher bar for action to address the needs identified. Deadline for the Bay Area is the end of the month. With all due respect, this is not personal to Santa Clara. We're not party to the letter that was covered by the Assistant City Attorney, and his effort was thorough, but I believe he's failed to note significant regulatory guidance documents that would inform his response more fully, and perhaps is too dismissive. I wouldn't recommend a particular action from this commission in response. To be clear, Los Angeles County is now 14 months past their deadline, and only half of the cities have received certification for their housing element. The biggest mistake we've seen throughout the state is cities trying to get close enough and being told that they actually have to take additional steps. Also, to be very clear, as Rena noted, resource constraints are what shapes development. I will tell you that Adam is being optimistic. The truth is no, we will continue to fall short. We will not see all of this housing built, but we are required to create opportunities and remove barriers. And I appreciate the reference to our recommendation at the beginning of this meeting, and I hope that there will be support.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Appreciate your comments. I would like to recognize NorCal Carpenters, Rigo Gallardo.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, members of the Santa Clara Planning Commission. First and foremost, allow me to say thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Rigo Gallardo, and I am a representative from Local Union 405 for the Santa Clara County. I'm speaking on behalf of approximately 39,000 union carpenters, men and women across Northern California, including 7,700 active members right here in Santa Clara County. As you begin to roll out your future plans for the upcoming housing element for the next 8 years, let's keep in mind area labor standards, ones that include a livable wage, healthcare, apprenticeships, and local hire. a livable wage with medical and retirement benefits that allows workers and their families to live in the communities they work in. Also means those wages will be reinvested back into local economic community. As they spend their earnings and their tax dollars will help fund local schools and government. A commitment to accredited apprenticeship programs to guarantee we will continue to have a trained, skilled, and experienced workforce that is able to complete high-quality projects in a safe and timely manner. Apprenticeships pave a way for a career in the construction industry for men and women and disadvantaged youth in the community, a proven escalator to the middle class. Healthcare is vital in these COVID years, and having healthcare for families is a big necessity. And I believe if you work hard full-time, you should have access to healthcare. Having local hire provisions allows workers to spend more time with their families and being more involved in your community. Redwood City, a neighbor city up north, encourages developers and contractors to evaluate hiring local labor, hiring from or contributing to apprenticeship programs, increasing resources for labor, compliance, and providing living wages in their housing element plan.
Mr.
Thank you for your
Gallardo,
time.
thank you. Thank you for your comments and feedback. Do we have any other members of the public? Okay. Is there a motion to close public comment?
Hearing.
A public comment?
So
No,
moved.
it's a public hearing.
A hearing.
Okay. So move.
Yeah.
So moved, and seconded.
Second. You know what?
Okay, well, either
go.
way. Take your pick.
Just do it.
Commissioner Biagini, motion, seconded by Commissioner Boozer. Thank you. Thank you. I'll give some last color commentary. I fully appreciate the year and a half effort, if not more, during the pandemic. This has been quite a very concerted effort. I do appreciate the staff going out and seeking outreach from various possibilities. I think at one point, even I responded to the survey, and the languages that we have done is substantially more than we have ever done before. So thank you for the outreach. Thank you for incorporating HCD's first layer of comments and thoroughly responding. As I am anticipating, there may be other rounds, but because HCD is taking a closer look, and to feedback from our members of the community, SV at Home, thank you, Matthew Reed. I have seen your website, and thank you for doing a very thorough job of documenting every city's and tracking their housing element plans. It's a huge resource for the community, and what you do is very commendable. So that said, I do appreciate the timeline that we can meet, not because we have not, been able to do our homework or due diligence. We have done everything that the HCD requires, and the plan is ready to be submitted. I acknowledge there's always, room for improvement. It's a large element. It's a large housing vision for the city. It's an 8-year plan. Plans are plans, like pandemic hit. Who knew what the future was 3 years ago? And who knew the supply chain would be so impacted by the war in Ukraine? Those are factors we all are very cognizant of. The tech layoffs, well, albeit a temporary blip, I hope, is causing significant changes too to the communities. So variables are always going to be there. What the city tries is to look forward to something very positive, to making its due faith effort in achieving the needs of the community and housing. We definitely have a record number that we have to achieve, and the city of Santa Clara is stood by its efforts to meet those and exceed those housing supplies. We're always looking to better ourselves in the very low income and the low income. I think we'll get there, but it's like it's catching up, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But with that said, I am fully in support of making the recommendation to the city council to adopt both the addendum to the EIR and to make a favorable recommendation on the housing plan element. Thank you. I look for other comments and motion.
And I'm sorry, Chair, I believe we never actually had a vote on the motion to close the public hearing. I think it's still
Right, we
pending.
didn't take the vote.
No, I was just making a comment.
Okay, move to close
No,
public.
you already moved.
We're ready.
We just need the final vote.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
We closed it.
Motion is to close public hearing. Commissioner Bhatnagar,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini,
Yes.
Chair Kuru,
Yes.
Commissioner Wang,
Yes.
Commissioner Buza,
Yes.
Commissioner Slame.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now I add the paragraph that I said after that.
You have to say it again from scratch.
So was that a motion you made that I can second, or do you want me to say so moved?
The motion is all yours.
I would recommend you make two motions tonight, one
had a
on the
feeling you'd
addendum,
say that.
one on the housing element, and it would be on that second motion that the modification would take place, should you be inclined to make one.
So then I will start with a motion to, that we recommend to the city council to adopt the addendum to the environmental impact report.
And I apologize, in our agenda report, we forgot to say, adopt a resolution to, so with your
And
permission, we will.
adopt the accompanying resolution, just like Xander said.
Thank you,
I
Commissioner.
know I get big,
Second.
that's why I make you do it.
Okay, it's all right.
I'll second.
Everybody seconds.
Okay, so we have a motion and a
Yes.
second.
Okay. And this is to approve staff recommendation 1.
Yes.
Commissioner Bhatnagar,
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini,
Yes?
Chair Kuru,
Yes.
Commissioner Wang,
Yes.
Commissioner Buza,
Yes.
Commissioner Slame.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to make a second motion to adopt a resolution to recommend the city council amend the general plan by adopting an updated housing element for the 2023 to 2031 cycle. And if Xander wanted to add a friendly amendment, I'd be amenable to it.
I want to remind that we had some comments from, from
SV at home.
SB at home that we were going to incorporate in the recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, I brought that up too. And incorporate the conversation from a couple of hours ago about the recommendations in the wording that was added and deleted as appropriate in the letter from Silicon Valley at Home. I can pull that up
To action item 13.
on action item 13. Thank you. And thank you for reminding me.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay. So the motion is to approve staff recommendation 2 and to incorporate Silicon Valley at Home language for action item 13?
Yes.
Basically? Okay, thank you. Okay. Commissioner Bhatnagar?
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini?
Yes?
Chair Kuru?
Yes?
Commissioner Wang?
Yes.
Commissioner Buza?
Yes.
Commissioner Slame?
Yes.
Thank you.
That, I, one, again,
Can I have one comment? No.
yes.
So this is a post-vote comment. It may sound like we have just quickly passed through this. I personally spent the last 2 days grinding through intense amounts of documents to make sure that I wasn't voting arbitrarily on something. And I think a great deal of effort has been made by all the commissioners here to come to a conscious and well-considered decision. So I want to thank our attorney, Xander, for clarifying something that was left I couldn't understand with the legal letter. But thanks to everyone, I think, for putting in the effort to make sure they understood this.
Any other comments or feedback?
Thank for IT for getting us through this.
All right. Thank you again, staff, for a very commendable, and wishing the City Council to pass it soon. Okay, moving to other order of items for today. We have reports of commission, board liaison, and committee. Am I on the right item? Yes. Any announcements? If none, we can actually go to the one that, thank you, Elizabeth, for Commissioner Travel and Training Reports. Request to attend training. 3 of our commissioners were able to attend today's Economic and Mayor's Forecast 2023 event, sponsored by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Thank you for retroactively allowing the commission members to take a vote tonight to approve the attendance and the cost for the ticket. I'll share my insight on the event. Thank you again to my fellow commissioners who were there. It was a very insightful mayor engagement. I would say the time was not sufficient for a full and vetted discussion for such a vast topic and for such an important topic. The time was very, I would say, constrained because with 4 mayors of significant cities to even grasp their thoughts would have needed a little more time. So just a color commentary that while the intent and the notion and the aspiration was there, I think it slightly was constrained by time to have a fully engaged and valuable discussion. But nevertheless, it was a good engagement. Commissioner Biagini.
And I have to say that one thing that struck me when I walked in there was, we had 2 new mayors and 2 seasoned mayors. And looking at the dais, I remember when I was a little girl, it looked rather homogeneous up there. And to see that there were women and minorities that made up the bulk of who was on the dais was something that made me smile. Plus the fact that I see a dawning of a new relationship between the big city near us and Santa Clara, and that was a positive spin on today.
That's a great insight.
Yeah, and I want to just, I was really thrilled the way that our mayor represented our city and spoke to the audience and the commission. She kept her own, and we looked like we were the biggest city, the most important city in there, even though San Jose was there. So yeah, she made us proud, and my congratulations to her.
Yeah. I second that. We were well rooted in our mayor's ability to recommend and even stand tall, parallel with all of the other cities, both large and small, as Palo Alto claimed itself. But City of Santa Clara, what I think the highlight was our utility and our ability to still braze through the economic downturn with the pandemic and still come out strong because of our permitting process that has been streamlined. Thank you again, staff. That was well acknowledged. And definitely encouraging small businesses to come and even with the business tax, it was insightful that we are doing our level best to encourage small businesses to continue to make Santa Clara their home. Partnership with Santa Clara University and Mission College on inclusion and equity and diversity stood very high with all cities, but with Santa Clara, and thanks to the mayor for having stated that for the record. So,
and
again, very proud of the city.
I think for those that are wondering who these mayors were, we had the mayor from Santa Clara, San Jose, Fremont, and Palo Alto. So you had an array in the county of large and small cities.
Yep. Very, very nice, short, but a good event. I'm looking forward to more. And as the commission, we are going to attend the, what's the next one on February 17th? The State of the Valley by
Joint venture.
Joint venture, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think that is a little more robust. We will have a full-on data-based analysis that comes from our veteran, Russell Hancock, I believe, and a very, very good virtual event at this time. It used to be, again, in person, but next year, maybe in person. Actually, I was making a pitch in my company to have a table, but we'll see. It's a good event to attend just to get, and with the economic changes that are happening, I wanted to just share a little insight. Other sectors are booming, so I want the community, and it's not just the tech industry that has been taking up our attention via media. We ought to realize retail, manufacturing, which City of Fremont touted really well, the Teslas and the R&D labs, and healthcare is aggressively recruiting. So our job market is still high. So it should send a ray of hope, and it should not be all, oh my God, Google laid off 12,000, Amazon laid off 10,000. That's not the message. The community really ought to realize that the jobs are still out there. And that's one thing that even we need to know in the jobs housing balance, with the housing element. The ratio that 2.8 jobs per household is the fact. So trying to increase, especially in multifamily, the ratio of jobs to match the housing that we ought to be giving in RENA numbers. We are forgetting that big equation that we need to increase our jobs to match the housing. So thank you again. With that, Director of Community Development reports.
I think you need to take a vote to
sorry.
retroactively expend funds.
I thought it was in the
That's
budget.
right, for the,
It's not in the next item, budget updates?
No, we did not vote on expending the
Okay,
funds last time, so we're doing a retroactive vote. And it was 3 tickets at $95, which comes to $285, yeah.
Thank
So if somebody wants to make a motion.
I'll make the motion to retroactively approve for 3 commissioners to attend today's meeting. $95 each times 3 is $285, so that would be the motion for the 285.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll do the vote.
Yes. Commissioner Bhatnagar?
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini?
Yes.
Chair Kuru?
Yes.
Commissioner Wang?
Yes.
Commissioner Buza?
Yes.
Commissioner Salam?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for keeping us straight there. Director of Community Development reports.
Can I just, on your training, I did want to let you know that I did touch base with the Institute for Local Government. Commissioner Bhatnagar had asked about this. So I actually had quite a discussion with them today about doing a study session. And they're preparing a proposal. And they have proposed 2 hours. So we can look at some dates probably in March or April, because there is a process with the city, an agreement that has to be processed. So I want to let you know that, and once we get the information, the actual proposal, we can come back and let you know, and you can determine how much you want to spend. There's different tiers for what they will do. So we did follow up on that, Commissioner Bhatnagar, and just wanted to give you an update on that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Salam.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that since we passed through it, you did mention the layoffs in a lot of the tech right now. It should probably be remembered, noted that Apple has not yet, at this time, pursued any substantial layoffs. And I believe Apple is probably one of our single highest contributors to residency and commercial overlap with us, given their location just north of our border, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, so far we're okay. West, okay, thank you. I don't know, I have to turn the compass. Yes, so keep in mind, we're still,
okay.
Yeah, we're okay so far.
Thank you for the ray of hope. Again, yes. Yeah, we have quite a few significant companies in our city. NVIDIA, ServiceNow, name the gamut. We have all the data centers still too.
Yeah, I just want to, since you mentioned a lot about the business and so on, I just want to make sure that we can expedite the process of getting approval for permits and for the small businesses coming in and small manufacturers coming into the city. I was told that we're just starting to get the process going. I would really like to see them kind of move along. And that's one of the things our mayor said, that we were getting on track and moving a little bit faster than most other cities. So I want to see that really take effect very soon.
Noted. Okay. Now going to Planning Commission budget updates.
We don't have the budget report for today. It's the same as it was
As
the
last
last
time with the
meeting, which was
285.
10,000, I think it was about 10,400.
Thank you. Any upcoming agenda items from staff?
There are no upcoming agenda items to report. I will give you a heads up. Our February meetings are looking very slim. We do have 2 meetings. There may be a possible cancellation of one, so just a heads up on that. And depending on the outcome of Elizabeth's research, hoping to get a study session for you soon. So more to come on that.
Make that 3. City Council actions.
There are no city council actions to report.
All right. With that, with 2 minutes to 9, I call the meeting adjourned. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I'd like to see anybody say no.
If there's no objections, we're adjourned, I think.
Consensus vote.
Yes.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great
Thank you
evening.
all.
Thank you, commissioners online and
Yes,
staff.
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Rena.
Thank
Bye.
you, Rena. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
John,
you.
thanks very much.